I want to go back to Storm Éowyn because it wreaked havoc on our forests. In just a few hours, 2.5 times the annual timber harvest was brought to the forest floor, where much of it remains today. What happens next is crucial for the survival of the sector as the government pushes for more trees to be planted to help meet our climate targets. This is just some of the damage in a forest in Cavan. We shot this earlier today. It shows what forest owners are contending with still. And we have some pictures now of the situation in Navan, and this is a forestry belonging to John Sherlock. And John Sherlock joins us now. John, you're very welcome.
Thank you.
Looking at those pictures there, I mean, really incredible, devastating damage to your entire forest there. What was your own reaction when you realised what had happened?
Well, it was, I would say, one of these life-defining moments that happen in your life, you know. This family, our family, my father, was an active farmer throughout his life. Retired because of Parkinson's, planted this forest. And these people that planted these forests were the true believers, because they planted them back in the day before we were really bought in on climate change. These trees grew, fantastic resource, and in just one event, all wiped out. So we have, I'm in a forest owner group, our treasurer here, Peter, and Derek, our chairman. We have loads of members, we have 100 members. This is only just a snapshot of what we have. We have people in their senior years, planted this in good faith, and now this is what could be their pension, what could be their nursing home, or what could be their children's education. This is gone. And here we are, trying to sell our timber, trying to get our timber out of the forest to sell it, to take what we're given. And this is, I'm really, really honest about this. We are in a situation where we're having to take what we're given. We're having to beg harvesting companies, sawmills, etc., to come look at our timber.
I want to get the Minister's response to what John Sherlock was saying there before the break.
Well, first of all, of course, the storm has been devastating. People, what I would call, gave over their land to forestry many years ago. And they did so in good faith, and they nurtured their forests and they watched them grow. And then all of a sudden, in the space of a couple of hours, they were left with devastation. But I'm glad of one thing, is that it's my responsibility to get this right. And I have to be honest, John, I am getting it right. You gave an impression here tonight that nothing is being done and it's all a disaster. And I have to state a couple of facts now. And I go in straight lines and I say what happens. You know for a fact, I visited your own place. I visited every part of this country. I understand the problem. I reacted to it very quickly. And I'll just give you an example. I changed the whole licensing system, right? In that you had a thinning license and then you had a felling license. I merged those two together immediately to ensure that we finished up with that out of every bit of timber that has fallen in this country, which is 26,000 hectares, 64% of that has a license. In other words, people can go in, they can harvest it, and they can sell their timber.
But they can't, though, is the problem. John is saying that there's no market for it.
But you see, no, that's not true. That is not true.
Is that
no. Well, I'll finish now because I'm entitled to answer back. The sawmills have a capacity. That is another thing. It has been stated that the sawmills don't have capacity. I visited sawmills last week that are operating at 60%. There are people doing a single shift. They can do a double shift when it will be required, and they will do so. We have excellent machinery and excellent families who have invested millions and millions of euros into their sawmills. And they are ready and able to. Our hauliers, the contractors, we're after bringing in additional machinery, the harvesters and the forwarders that actually harvest the timber and bring it out. So, yes, it has been a disaster what happened, but the way we're reacting to it is very proactive. And then the whole licensing regime. There was one time if you looked for a license, you could be waiting for a year and a half, 2.5 years. That is now at 6 months. Right? And we're reducing it week on week. The people who will put in where they've been damaged by the storm, they will be dealt with a lot quicker. And I'm very grateful to the work that the head of the forestry, Barry Delaney, and others are doing on a daily basis in upping our game to ensure that we respond to situations like this.
But we saw, those pictures we saw tonight are taken today. So why are John's trees still on the floor of his forest?
Because there is 26,000 hectares on the ground. And we are working at this. It's not going to happen like that. And another thing that you must remember, those trees that you've seen, they're still connected to the ground, right? Any tree that gets knocked that way, ones that are snapped, yes, they're dying right away, they're losing weight. But ones that are like that, it's like being connected with an umbilical cord, they're still connected to the ground. And we have a good bit of time, and I'm not trying to say, oh, kick this can down the road. You know I'm not saying that. You know about forestries. And you know that there's a year and a half in which we will have to remove all this timber off the ground. But to look at that and say...
A year and a half? Could they be waiting for a year and a half?
What I'm saying is to take 26,000 hectares off the ground and harvest it and process it, it could take that little time.
Derek, you're shaking your head there.
Oh, there's a number of inaccuracies there in what you're talking about. You know, we're after going through 6 weeks of hot weather. Trees are losing 5% per month in weight on those trees. So we're losing. We're losing.
So this umbilical cord isn't doing a great job, is what you're saying?
Absolutely not. And the proof of that is you go out and look at John's trees or anyone else's, the needles are gone. They're brown. If they were alive, they'd be green.
Have you been out there? Because I was.
Absolutely was. And
were you in John's?
I was in John's. I was in
because I've been in a lot of them as well.
I was in my own.
Including last week.
I was in the second one that was on the TV screen earlier. We're a forest owners group. We look after forest owners and look after their interests. I'm a volunteer. I have been run ragged for the last 4 months. I'm taking calls, up on 1,000 calls, I'd say, on that. A lot more, I'd say, than you did, Minister.
Do you think I'm idle or something?
Well, I absolutely do. I think you haven't performed. Absolutely haven't performed. We're a producer group. You've done nothing, not one thing for our members to date. You've talked, you've set up a task force, you've talked around the subject. A task force, to me, government set them up, is one of the best tools to quell argument, quell anybody that has any opinion that's different than yours, and let the whole thing die down.
I wouldn't do that.
OK, let me tell you then that we took self-help in this situation because you didn't do anything. I asked you down to a meeting in Carrick-on-Shannon at the end of February, and I asked your officials to go. You didn't come. I expected maybe 20 or 30 people to come to that meeting. 250 people turned up. I seen elderly couples coming in there linked. These were pioneers that planted trees 25 years ago. And that's the respect that you showed those people. You can't do that. You have to have some compassion for these people that went out and planted.
You think I don't have compassion?
You're certainly not showing it yet.
Well, all I can tell you is you asked me to one meeting. I can't do by location. I can't be in 2 places at the same time. Sure. And you know for a fact, because we told you at the time I couldn't go to that meeting and I was genuinely sorry. But I can't go to every meeting.
Why didn't you send some of your officials?
All I can tell you is you know that I am doing everything I can do. Whether it's the haulage,
so what did we do
whether it's
next?
the contractors,
what did we do next?
Whether it's the sawmills, and you know that I am dealing with this in an extremely proactive fashion.
I'd love to know how you brought in harvesting contractors. You said you brought in. Tell me how you brought in harvesting contractors.
We absolutely did.
You?
Yes.
Your department brought them in?
Quilty. Yes.
Oh, that's separate. Now, hold on. So you're bringing them in. So the department is working for Quilty now.
And the other thing, no, but Quilty have trees that are knocked as well.
That's not you, and that's not the department. You said you brought them in.
Well, I think that the responsibility for Quilty is my responsibility, and I'm dealing with that as well.
Okay.
And you know that I'm dealing with the private forestry owners, who I'm very obliged to do everything I can to help them.
Okay.
And also Quilty.
I speak for my constituents,
and I
my
speak
members.
for everybody.
I speak for my members, and we see no action on the ground.
You don't.
Our members have gone. The sawmills have control of the market here. The Kilcha have control of the market. We cannot get a fair price for our product. You talked about capacity. Absolutely, the capacity is there. But when you're getting next to nothing for your timber...
Well, John said the capacity... Make up our minds now. Because we have 2 people from the
you
private
were the one
sector
that said
here.
The capacity was there.
John said there was no capacity, and you were saying there is.
Whether there is or isn't.
Well, I can tell you there is.
OK, but the price is not coming. Imagine that we could mobilise harvesting companies from Europe to come in here, harvest our timber, put it on a boat. For the first time in the history of the state, we have exported sawlog from this country to Belgium. We done that. We done that ourselves with no help from you or the department. We done that ourselves because we were getting no help. Now, it's a momentous occasion for us, but to think that we could do that and that there's profit in it for the company doing that, does that not illustrate to you what profits are there for the sawmills? Does that not tell you that? It should.
OK, I want to bring in the rest of our panel on this. And Éowyn, I know you watch closely what's happening in tree planting and the targets that we have set and that we've missed. The target, I'm looking at 22 million newly planted trees per year is what we'd need to be putting in to meet the 2040 target we have. How is that going?
Well, it's not going well at all. And in fact, we have the lowest amount of forests in the whole of the EU with 11%. And the reason for this is because the Department of Forestry is not allowed to give grants to state-sponsored bodies to buy land to plant trees. So essentially, since the end of the 1990s, all of the afforestation, all of the new land being planted with trees is done entirely by private landowners, not by Coillte. Coillte can reforest, they can harvest and plant again, but they cannot do new land because they haven't got the money to buy it. And that policy has stopped the afforestation. That's why, I mean, it's not a mystery why we have 11% and haven't had it increase for the last 30 years. That is the reason why. So this is why it is like this. And the second thing then is planting trees. Then we have two sorts of things. We have the crop. We have the Sitka spruce, or the harvesting, the trees that are planted for timber and that are harvested as a crop. And then we have our native forests, which are a source of biodiversity, which is something that we have a biodiversity crisis in Ireland. And again, that needs to be looked at as well. I mean, ash trees are our native tree. It is devastated by this ash dieback, and as a consequence that can't be planted anymore at the moment. So we certainly need to have a situation whereby we can plant more trees all around the country, and issuing planting licences and making sure that they're planted according to these on the conditions with the planting licences are really important. So I welcome the fact that you're saying felling licences have been given at short notice, a couple of months. It takes longer to get a planting licence, and it shouldn't.
Your minister in the last government for forestry was Pippa Hackett, a Green Party senator. She didn't turn the tide on this in the 5 years she had to do it.
She did. The reason Michael claimed credit for bringing the licensing time down to 6 months where it was terrible, several years. That was because of the work Pippa did. She introduced a new forestry programme that dramatically increased the premiums to switch towards more native forestry that gives us biodiversity as well as all the other benefits. She introduced a new scheme where farmers could introduce a 1 hectare, or if you're beside a river, 2 hectares. 500 farms have now picked up on that and are actually growing and developing it.
Without any permission at all?
Yes,
that's allowed.
huge benefit and change. The new minister's come in, and not only, as we've heard here from the industry, is he not sorting out the problem that this storm has created, but he's saying in the Shannon last week that he wants to give up on climate change altogether, and we'll put all the new forestry up on peaty soils that you can't do if you're taking climate seriously. And we've also got Coillte nature being abandoned by Coillte. That's not the future forestry we need, particularly in a world where these storms are going to create more and more havoc for the old model of clear fell, single spruce, forestation.
Coillte Nature was the biodiversity non-profit part of Coillte, and that's been stood down now. Can I just ask you about the peatlands, the growing trees and peatlands, very quickly on that, because
I have to answer one
and you
thing.
can answer that as well.
Because there was an accusation made. You said that I didn't change the licensing laws. I'm very sorry, Éowyn. I'd love to know what goes on inside in your head, because what you just said is factually untrue.
You changed one thing in putting that felling licence together, but the actual reduction in licensing time became because of what Pippa had done.
You're actually crazily wrong. And I'm just going to tell you another statistic. Seeing as you like statistics, 455 hectares were done this time last year. So far, I'm after ensuring there's 1,078 approved, planted and paid for, and 1,800 hectares committed to already.
And you said they're going to go
that would blind you into oblivion as to what you did this time last year.
You've said in the Shannon you want to put them on peaty soils, which tears up any climate ambition in this government, which makes a complete mockery.
And I suppose...
Sorry, can I ask you about that? I want to ask you about that. This was described as, by Professor Peter Thorne, a climate scientist, as environmental vandalism, and this is the quote, about the dumbest thing we can do from the point of view of climate action.
Well, obviously, here, my eye. The person that said that didn't hear what I said last week. You must remember that you agreed to the last forestry programme. And I'll remind you, the last forestry programme allows for planting trees on peaty ground. Now,
30 centimetres.
Yes, but did I say that I wanted to plant on deep peat? I never said that. Or on blanket bogs. I never said that. I've read the record of the Shannon and I know exactly what I said. But you and a few other people are trying to box me into a corner of saying, oh, that I'm saying it's a free-for-all. I'll remind everybody here tonight that when you go home tonight and when you look up at your roof, it's timber that's holding it up. The stud partitions in the majority of people's homes in Ireland is made out of timber. Now, if we don't plant trees, what we'll do is we'll do the Healy-Rae policy. We won't have them at all ourselves, but we'll import them from Scotland. We'll import them from his favourite place on the planet, Brazil, where he likes to bring everything from.
Is there any issues in your mind about planting trees on peatland?
Yeah. Can you say
I'll tell you exactly what I said.
What did you say?
If you go up in the sky today, Éowyn,
just
will you just leave me finish? And if you look down, on Ireland today, the majority of the land that we actually have forests on, you couldn't plant under today's regime.
That's now, what did you say in Shannon?
What I said was, we're spending. I'm running down note. I'll stay here for the night with you if you like.
The cameras won't.
I'm relying on science, right? And my department is spending 2.7 million euros. I'm trying to ensure that we can look at peaty ground, because you must remember, storing carbon, growing trees is one of the best ways we can store carbon. Yes, digging or draining deep peat ground releases carbon. So what we have to do is we have to rely on science. And I'm relying on science. And I'm trying to explore more ways that we can have a balance. Now, Éowyn wouldn't like to hear this, or anybody like him, because they'd hate to hear of common sense coming to play. If we want to plant more and more trees, and if we want to hit 8,000 hectares a year, every forester in this country that knows what they're talking about, unlike some people, they know that we have to plant ground that has peat on it. Because we're not allowed, we're competing with other farm schemes.
I was just going to say, this is about farms that are unproductive for other means. And it's a way to make money out of unproductive land.
It's about using land to its best potential. And
so it's not about climate or sequestering carbon or what we normally talk about when we talk about trees. It's about farmers getting money out of unproductive land.
Not at all. If we want to plant trees, if we want to see after the environment for the future, it's obvious that we have to plant trees. And there is the little matter of, if we want to build homes, we need to have timber. And we need to have timber that we will have ourselves, not to be imported from places like Scotland, who are planting 17,000 hectares a year. And while we are dwindling under Éowyn's regime, but thankfully now we will improve on all of that.
I would agree with the Minister on the point that we do need trees.
It's a wonder we're looking in the wrong place.
While we are sitting here, there's 26,000 hectares on the ground. There's another 15,000 hectares tied up with ash problems. Why aren't we looking at them before we start looking at other ground?